Welcome to the Possibility Hub video series. I'm Carol Talbot, the creator and founder of the Possibility Hub, an advocate for awakening, encouragement, and creating opportunities for an expansion of awareness and consciousness. In this episode, I'm back in conversation with Matthew Ryan, the developer of an energetic healing modality called gamma wave healing, and we're talking about DNA. Is so-called junk DNA really junk? Or is it potential that requires awakening? And do we all have 12 strands of DNA? Or is it possible that some people have more? Welcome back, Matthew. And
Hi.
yeah, you had a birthday week and we were just talking, it was quite a celebration. Gone are the days where it's just one day, it's a whole week of celebration now.
Yeah, like why not celebrate, I think that's the way to do it. There's a lot to celebrate in this life, and I'm grateful for the friends and the family and all the dear loves, that are in my life. And so that was really a wonderful celebration last week.
Wonderful. And here we are, and there you are, a year younger. Or if you like me, going backwards.
Yeah, 36 all over again.
Totally. So today we're going to talk about DNA, because it forms the foundation of a lot of the work that you do, and it comes up in every session with you.
Absolutely.
And I know you've got some very pertinent information there. And I wanted to kick off really with a parable that's in one of Cryon's books. Cryon is channeled by Lee Carroll and is written or channeled through a number of books, but one particular book was called The 12 Layers of DNA. I know we're going to go beyond the 12 layers. And one of the metaphors was particularly pertinent that I wanted to just start with today. And it says, a group of ancients makes an extraordinary discovery. Left on the beach by a time traveler is an amazing wireless stereo system. The small, efficient speakers are pumping out the most amazing rhythms, and the men are mesmerized by it all. And they don't dare touch it, but they sit and enjoy the music, not understanding how it's being produced or anything about the gleaming equipment before them. After many days, they begin to look deeper into the seeming magic of it all. They're curious, for curiosity is the main trait of the human being. And they begin to analyze it. They look it over again and again, not daring to touch it. And the elders have finally announced to all that they've figured it all out. They see the CD player, the main amplifiers, and the processors that are sitting with the speakers, lots of equipment. And the speakers, however, are where the audio is coming from. And so it is the speakers that are seemingly doing all the work. So the tribe comes together and they announce their findings. Advanced space creatures have landed and left some of their equipment. The wise men of the tribe can't figure out what everything does, and 2 small items are responsible for the wonderful music they're hearing. The rest of the equipment is a mystery and must simply be space junk that isn't related to the music. So, when we think of science that says so much of our DNA is just junk DNA rather than potential, I thought that was a wonderful metaphor to start our discussion today. And as you said, and as I said earlier, DNA forms the foundation of every single session you do. And I know that when we were speaking, when I had an initial session with you, you go beyond 12-strand DNA.
Yeah. So I like that little parable there, that metaphor of the useful and the non-useful, and like how we sometimes maybe we get caught up in the perception of what's immediately in front of us, and we lose sight of all of that other junk that's actually very important. And yeah, that's if people aren't familiar with what you're referring to in our world of genetics and our DNA, we have this, the model of our DNA that has been presented to us as this two-strand model of a double helix, and which by the way, funny enough, I just spoke with my son this morning on his way to school that after Watson and Crick, when I think it was Crick, I'm not sure, but I think it was Crick, that after he died, his family revealed that the inspiration for the model came to him during an LSD experience. And that he saw the model, like the holographic model of the DNA, and then they were able to express it. So, I think that that's really kind of a funny aside, but this model of the DNA, with all of its information in the human genome, the way that the scientists treat this is they say that there's all this information that is like the coding information. It's the code that informs the expression of this body, and then the rest of it, which is about 95% of the remainder of the DNA, they say is non-coding DNA, or people refer to it as junk DNA. And it couldn't be further from the truth. That's in the work that I have done with people when we are viewing the DNA, that, even just on the two-strand model of the physical expression of the DNA, that this 95% is definitely not junk. It represents incredible potential that is there. It also represents a lot of quantum communication that is going on through the DNA. And so, I almost never am referring to two-strand DNA. Like you said, I'm always going to be working with a model of holographic DNA that has at least 12 strands. What I have come to understand, what I've been shown, what I've been told, is that the original human being, the going back, let's say, hundreds of thousands of years, maybe millions of years, and that the Earth human being had a DNA model that had 12 strands. And these 12 strands, the genetic makeup received contributions from numerous sources, including the original kind of, pre-proto Homo sapiens stock that was here on Earth. But the star beings, very advanced civilizations, created different changes and added things into the DNA to produce this 12-strand model. What ended up happening, though, when many thousands of years ago, this original kind of 12-strand blueprint of DNA was then modified by beings that are often referred to as the Anunnaki, but there were other groups as well that were doing these modifications. And the result being that 12-strand pattern was modified and kind of suppressed in a way, so that its physical expression ended up being the two-strand model. But what they weren't able to do was to remove the original holographic blueprint. And so what I see all the time now with everybody that I work with is that pretty much every human being, I've been told, on Earth has had this 12-strand blueprint reactivated within their DNA. Primarily due to the influx of light codes that are coming in from the sun, the cosmic waves that are coming in, I guarantee are also having an influence. But so that's the model that I'm looking at. I see the DNA as a hologram. And as a hologram, one of the amazing things about a hologram is that the holograms they're fractals. So meaning that within, like, the definition of a hologram being that within every part of a holographic image, let's say, there is the entire blueprint is contained within every single individual piece. So yeah, like if we you go into the shopping mall and you see, like in the 1980s, we used to see this where you'd see like a little holographic, toys or trinkets that you could buy. And if it were truly a holographic image, you would be like, let's say it's a fire truck, you would be able to zoom in onto the tire of the fire truck, let's say. And as you got closer and closer and closer, and the tire's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the whole image of the fire truck would be contained within each individual piece of that tire. So it becomes a fractal. It just goes into infinity. And our DNA expresses in the same way. My understanding of how those those different, you know, layers of expression, or those fractal layers of expression change, is based on frequency. So when I'm working with people, we see the 12-strand DNA model, and everybody has some level of energetic connection within that 12-strand DNA. But there also are other layers. As the DNA fractals, that 12-strand can become 144 strands out at the next level. So it's like a bundle of 12 for each of the core 12 strands of DNA. And this goes on. I don't know how far this goes. You know, I mean, it is in my direct experience. I definitely, I've gone, you know, many layers of perception into DNA, and then at a certain point, it's just beyond comprehension what you're perceiving. So there's a huge mystery and a huge wealth of information that is contained within our DNA, and is being constantly upgraded or constantly uploaded with information. And that's kind of where my healing modality can come in, that we can identify distortions, clear these energies holographically, and then upload new patterns of energy, which then creates significant changes for people.
So if we are, you know, our DNA has been, shall we say, tampered with, some switched on or neutralized, and I believe that's the case. And that also there's many, you know, when we talk about other species, other beings, we talk about hybrids. Yet, you know, to a certain extent, we are hybrids ourselves. So
Totally.
you know, we all have different potential. So,
Yes.
you know, to me, it's about waking up the dormant introns or potential DNA through, and this is where light language can come in, where sound
Absolutely.
can come in. You know, if you're utilizing ancient codes, then, or ancient language or original founders' language, it's almost if the DNA goes, I remember that, I remember that. And then, as you were saying, with the holographic nature, that opens the door to the way that we understand our connectedness. When I usually explain for people who are not clear about what a hologram is, I often say, take the metaphor of a photograph. If you have a photograph, cut it in half, what you're left with is two halves of the same picture. To see the whole picture, you need to put those two halves together. But a hologram, if you cut it in half, both halves contain the whole. And if you cut those halves in half again, each part contains the whole. And then if you understand our connection to all that is, that allows you to see the connection to every single person, every single being, every single thing, all matter. We become part of it rather than the illusion of separateness which we all live in.
Absolutely. That, I think that's a really important point, and this comes up quite a bit. You know, maybe not like, I don't maybe speak about that specifically in the work, but it is like a foundational understanding of working with energy, especially when we're getting into the DNA, is to understand that DNA, the human DNA that we have, you know, we may have 8 billion people, 8 billion individual expressions of DNA that are on the earth right now, and each one of those is unique. They are unique individual expressions of a unified field of consciousness that is the human being consciousness. It is the human blueprint that is expressed in our DNA. And so there's individual expression, but all of us contain this holographic blueprint that in a general sense unites all of us everywhere. And so, you know, when you're accessing certain realms of energy, certain frequencies, like I work with Metatron, so Archangel Metatron, and the way that Metatron has been shown to me for many years is as a field, an infinite field of consciousness that permeates all of existence. And when we go into that field and we're able to perceive things, we can see the entire human hologram within this field. And as it's really a really amazing thing, because the first time I saw this in a vision, in a meditation, whatnot, I didn't really understand what I was seeing, where I saw this like infinite sea. It was like going into infinity, this plane that was like kind of a pinkish color, like a salmon, you know, toned color. And as I got closer and closer and closer to this, I began seeing all of these like little shapes within this infinite sea of this color. And as I got closer and closer, then all these little shapes, they were like little protuberances popping up out of this infinite field of pink. You're kind of like imagining like, pushing your finger through a piece of spandex, or like, standing on a trampoline, and so you have like the trampoline or the spandex is a unified cohesive sheet of material, but you can push your finger into it and create this individual thing, and you can push another finger into it, and then you've got two little things expressing in that field, and yet it is still the same homogenized field. And so this is a really excellent metaphor for understanding that even though we are individual expressions of consciousness, and we are all unified, and one of the things that primarily unifies us is this pattern of DNA that human beings carry, and that pattern exists everywhere in this universe, and the human being is actually a fairly common form of expression. They don't all look like us, for sure, but we are unified within that field via the human DNA.
Now, if our DNA holds the blueprint for who we are physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, that means that each time you learn something new, you're expanding your DNA.
Yes.
How do you help people expand and wake up their DNA with the work that you do specifically? Because you read into it, and then how are you updating it?
So I would say that as far as my personal role in that, most of the time when we're working with the DNA, I essentially hold open the space energetically and observe the changes, occur. They come in often, they'll come in directly from the field, like from the unified field. But, to specifically answer that of what we're doing, that I would say that there probably are a couple of different primary approaches. There are patterns of energy that have been shown to me through sessions, or through my work with plant medicines, through my work with, sound frequency meditation, things like that, that these patterns of energy that are expressing through human beings, that are in the DNA. And some of these patterns are distortions, as we've talked about, modifications maybe that were directly done to us, maybe modifications that occur in kind of a passive way by exposure to environmental toxins, to exposure to, different types of learning maybe, or socialization, programming, religion, like all of these different things can create patterns in the DNA. And so when we're working with a client, we identify these patterns. They sometimes will come forward saying, okay, here's a distortion in the DNA that's related to your sovereignty. And this distortion was implanted through organized religion over, thousands of years. So that we can go in and we can work with those kind of bigger patterns that affect a lot of people, and then clear those energies energetically. This is like a universal law or something, that when you are able to perceive energy directly, you have an authority to be able to work with that energy, as long as you're in the right vibrational alignment. So we can make changes, bring new things in to replace those patterns. The second way that really shows up would be through very specific things that are going on in the DNA, that would be distortions that get cleared, and then we receive uploads of information. And a lot of times this is going to be facilitated via the person's guides, or through my guides. Most of the guides that I would be working with are star beings. And so there are many, many different types of code that can be downloaded directly into the DNA. So those would probably be the two most common ways that the DNA expresses itself during the sessions. And then we get to observe. Once we make these changes, it's just like doing a software update on your phone. The new information gets downloaded, it overwrites anything that's obsolete, and then that gets uploaded through the entire field of the human being, and it begins expressing itself by making changes, but changes in perception, changes in whatever we're working with that DNA code.
And of course, some of those changes are happening now through a couple of weeks ago, when we were talking about the solar flares and you mentioned solar activation that is coming
Absolutely.
through. Does that also link to sun gazing? Many people advocate, if, and I don't mean in the height of the sun of the day, I mean first thing in the morning or as the sun's going down. I think it's, the first hour as the sun comes up, it's a different kind of energy that you get from the sun through sun gazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that I never really learned about the sun gazing until I already had started doing it, being intuitively guided to, like you said, in the morning or in the evening, the frequency of the light as it's coming through the atmosphere. This would be like the physics of it as it's coming through the atmosphere, and there's more atmosphere that it's moving through. The wavelength of the light is a little bit different, and it's very beneficial. So people that are sun gazing, or like me, I think maybe I'd mentioned before, in the recent months, I'd been really called to lay out in the sun, to lay out and get a tan, work on the tan. But that's not what I was doing. I was being instructed in order to receive codes, these light codes that are coming in on the sunlight right now. And so that's absolutely a primary way, I think, that it is you for the sun gazing. It is, you got to be mindful. Obviously, if your eyelids are going to open while you're looking at the sun, that's why you have the sun lower on the horizon. But what I do is I intentionally, gaze while breathing, and I always will breathe it in directly through the pituitary gland into the pineal gland on my inhale, and then on the exhale intentionally distribute those frequencies or those codes, all the way through my field, all the way through my body. And it is very refreshing. It's enlivening. It just wakes you up and fills your body with all of this prana. It's quite an amazing thing, and it absolutely is affecting our DNA right now.
I'll tell you a little, I'll tell you an experience I had after our friends in South Africa. I was there with them doing some plant medicine. And in one of the visions that I received, and this is really bizarre, the connection, I don't tell many people. In one of the visions, I had that there was a tiny crystal, and this crystal was implanted in your thumb, right in the corner in your thumb. And you take this crystal, I was to take that crystal which came out of here, and this was the vision, and put it in my third eye. And as we know, crystals hold information. Yep. We have the miasmic crystals in our body. They hold information. That it was to go into my third eye, like just so tiny, like the top of a pinhead in there in your third eye, so that when I looked at the sun, it would accelerate the energy. Now, when during some of these experiences, you have a gazillion images, you have a gazillion insights. Some you remember and some you don't. You just assume that your unconscious mind has integrated them. This particular one I remembered. Then I came back a number of weeks later here to Dubai. Lo and behold, somebody I know had a visiting therapist or person coming who does crystal tattoos. Now, if you research crystal tattoos, you're just going to get tattoo artists who do them in the shape of crystals and things like that. Sure. That wasn't the case. She literally takes very small pieces of crystal and they're tattooed. She does them according to the Mayan calendar and according to your date of birth. So I asked if I could have a crystal put in here. And she said, I'm not sure, I need to meet Carol first. So I met her and she said, okay. And so you can't see the tattoo, you can't see it, it's a colorless one. She actually put, I have citrine and emerald crystals in there.
Nice.
And I don't tell many people, and it's just very bizarre. I actually have another, you can see part of the tattoo there. where that one you can actually see, and it's aligned with this finger, again, through the Mayan
Wow.
calendar. You can't see the whole shape there, but in that there's also citrine and emerald. So although it's a
Awesome.
color, you can see that tattoo, but obviously I didn't want one you could see right on my this area. But you know, just as we were speaking, I thought, you know, with the crystals, with sun gazing, it was such an odd experience, Matthew, and it was so odd that I had that, and then literally 3 weeks later, after being back here, somebody comes out of the blue, something I never would have heard of, never would have considered, never
Sure.
in a million years. And I was like, gosh, I think I meant to do this.
Yeah, that's fabulous. I mean, being able to upload those frequencies in that kind of way, I've never heard of that technique, but
Oh,
that, you know, that sounds very interesting.
yeah, she
And
was coming in from Russia.
oh
Um,
wow, okay.
and I did ask some questions. I did ask about the crystals and cleansing the crystals before they go in. I really did, because they really
Uh-huh.
are just like little flecks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Even as you were describing, I was thinking about, you know, again, these traditions that come out of the ancient world. And like we look at our friends that live in India, you know, or around India, where people will wear a bindi, right, on right on the third eye. And you know, as you were talking about like images and sound, and then we think about also coming out of ancient India with like the yantra, the visible like a Shri yantra, you know, that you can, and in your meditation and looking at that, the frequencies are coming in and they will literally alter the DNA. They activate DNA. Or mantra, like the sound frequency of chanting certain sound frequencies, like in Sanskrit, that are designed to activate the DNA. You know, so these that sounds like or feels like a very ancient technique. You know, that could
Yes.
be thousands of years old that you were able to cross paths with. So that's fabulous.
And I totally agree with the like using the Sri Yantra, and I know from my own meditations, I use a particular light code image that I
Mhm.
either look at doing a pineal induction and take it down and all through the chakras. So I know that's part of my own meditation practice. Now, I wanted to
Awesome.
get into, we've really just stayed in 12 strand DNA. And
Mhm.
I'm going back to what I alluded to when we first opened this conversation, because
Yeah.
I was quite surprised when we first met and I had a session with you, and you alluded to more strands of DNA, and that there are people with more strands of DNA,
Yes.
18 strand and maybe even more. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, so this is something that over the last several years I've been observing, and honestly, the numbers of people that I've been observing have been increasing with this pattern. So what I see is that with some people, like let's say roughly 20% of the people that I work with, when we check in on the DNA, I will see, instead of the typical that I see is a 12-strand pattern that would be arranged, the 12 strands would be arranged in a circle, and then they're kind of like twisted, you know, like a helical structure, like in a bundle of cable. When I'm actually with it, it's untwisted, it's easier to see. Sometimes that 12 strands will be arranged into a different form. Instead of in a circular twisted bundle, it will arrange into two sets of six, which would be shaped like hexagons. This I call crystal DNA, because the, you know, crystal, right, has six sides on a quartz crystal, and so that crystalline DNA seems to be more of a it's like a harmonic, like a more harmonic arrangement and expression. So whenever I see the 12-strand DNA in two sets of six, those are almost always people that I would consider light workers. And then beyond that, there's yeah, so the 20% then that I kind of spoke of a little earlier, the 20% of people within that 12-strand pattern, 20% of them roughly have a pattern that has 18 strands. And 18-strand holographic pattern would be then in three sets of six. And all of these would be counter-rotating, you know, they'd rotate through each other holographically. That's a pretty rare pattern, and what it relates to is capacity. It's about the capacity of the light, the capacity of the information that flows through the DNA expression through us. And when I'm working with people and I see that 18 strand pattern, this is going to be people that are like working at a very high level of like a light worker kind of level. These are people that have very large missions, even if they're not aware of it quite yet. This kind of capacity is done or expressed through their DNA in order to provide a larger capacity. Now, I alluded to earlier that the DNA pattern, because it's a hologram, it can fractal, right? So there can be this larger expression where the 12 becomes 144. So it's like the 12 strands each have 12. Well, when you're looking at an 18 pattern, that would be 18 times 18, right? Because all of the 18 strands, when it fractals out, have another bundle of 18 that are associated, or maybe it would be another crystalline arrangement of 18 for each of those 18. That produces 324 strands. And again, as it fractals out, the numbers big. And like I said before, I mean, when you, at least for me, when I get into that point of perception, I've journeyed through the DNA, through fractal, it gets to a point where it's like white light. I mean, you just can't see anything else. But, as I had a friend ask some years ago during a regression, and she said, how many strands of DNA does God have? And we're like, I don't know, but what I do know, understand, is that as we work with these patterns, the DNA is it's so extraordinary, and it is so far beyond consensus reality acknowledged as understanding, all of which is extremely important, working on the physical body, gene therapies and these things, not these experimental gene therapies that are out there right now, but, like a of work that they're very important. But when we get into the program and we get into that kind of quantum expression in our DNA, that's where things get really, really interesting. And that's where the energy body really light up for people.
So really, this is the work that we need to be focusing on right now, that it's not junk DNA, it's potential, and that we all have a lot of potential. And that's the work to activate that, to accrete more and wake it up, whether that be through the light codes, through sound codes, to wake ourselves up. So our DNA, literally, we get turned on again, if you want to put it like that.
Absolutely. And what I'm observing, as I do sessions, throughout the week, I don't know how many people in total I've worked with over the years. It's over 1,000 for sure. And as we're going forward, let's say year, I've began this, this kind of increase. It's DNA and its expression is just taking off right now. And I'm seeing people that, like even recently, I saw somebody that had this 18 strand pattern, and this had like spontaneously occurred. It didn't occur through activation that I was facilitating. It didn't occur through, maybe a plant medicine ceremony that they had sat in. This was like a spontaneous shift in their DNA. And I'm told that is directly related to the solar energy. So the DNA is waking up in everybody around the planet right now. And as it does, we're seeing, these more access where people are pulling in information, like that process silent, where, crown chakra opens, information just comes right in. And a lot of people even that aren't seeking for, a spiritual enlightenment or anything like that, they're having these experiences. And I equate that to the DNA being activated or reactivated right now. And maybe those areas are making more connections. And that's ultimately when we're facilitating work with DNA and this new will come in, I will see new bridges, new light bridges that are connecting all of the different strands, and which gives it more authentic expression, which puts us closer and closer and closer and closer to being the fullest expression of our authentic being that we can be.
And isn't that lovely that it's happening anyway? You know,
Absolutely.
you know, because we always think, oh gosh, we've got to do the hard work or even the heart work. And so the more you acknowledge who you are, it's coming in anyway. So rather than resist, and I think that's part of the reason that we see people who are, you know, sometimes saying, oh gosh, I'm so tired at the moment. And it's part, you know, and this is the beauty of sleep, isn't it? That, you know, sleep is a time when our body is you know, getting to work and waking up as well on many different levels, and people remembering their dreams differently. Now, as we finish off today, I know that you can speak for a long, long time on DNA, that you have a wealth of information, even more information on DNA. And you said that when people sign up on your website or for a session, that there's actually a free small booklet that they get as a result, which is specifically on DNA. Is that the case?
Yes, that is. So on our website, which is gammawave.com, when you go there is a sign up that you can join the newsletter without, you know, booking an appointment. You can also, when you do book the appointment, you'll be automatically kind of registered onto the mailing list. And there is a free ebook that I had written that is a download basically that you have access to. I believe maybe it's over 20 pages. It's not like a really big book, but it does have a lot of information in there. It goes into some of the things that we've discussed. Yeah, that is available for free for anybody. Also on the website, there are some blogs on there that about holographic DNA in some detail. So those are both some apps that are available. And I'm even now thinking I probably want to go back in there and revisit that ebook and maybe write a second edition or something, because that was I believe it was written about 2 years ago, so it's pretty contemporary. But the changes that have been coming through in recent time, I guarantee there's new information that I could add into that.
And maybe there's an opportunity for a book, and maybe it's an opportunity for another conversation on light and sound codes that will assist people in those activations. And as I said, maybe that's a topic that we need to go into, and maybe share some light and sound codes, which would really be beautiful.
That's fantastic.
Well, thank you again for a wonderful and enlightening discussion on very, very important topic, and something that is happening to people, whether they know it or not. Your DNA, your potential DNA is waking up. Your potential is waking up. So
absolutely.
Thank you, Matthew, and join us again on the Possibility Hub.
Thank you very much, Carol. It's great to see you again.